My husband is restricting my education and career. We have been together since we were both 18. I was always ambitious and dedicated to my education, and he was lukewarm on education. I worked very hard to get into a prestigious college, but after freshman year I had to take a break for personal and mental health reasons. I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue school because I was under a lot of pressure and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. Then I started working in random jobs like retail and warehousing to pay the bills. Both of us did. During that time, he started taking classes at a community college. After a few years I grew up a bit and realized I needed to go back to school to get a better paying job, and I also had a strong desire to do more with my life. I was always ambitious, and while I was never completely sure exactly what I wanted to do, I usually had goals for myself. So I started going back to my original university to finish up my BA, and this has caused serious issues in my relationship. First of all, he has always been insecure and the jealous type, but I wasn't perfect either. I struggled with mental health a lot, but both of us had worked on a lot of our issues. When I started classes again, I would try to make conversations about what I learned that day or about random things that happened, the professors, assignments, etc., but he was not receptive at all and brushed me off a lot. He said he wanted to talk to me instead of talking about school. But I genuinely love learning and am passionate about my major, and I was excited to share that with him. Things came to a head when we were fighting about how he does not ask about my day or care when I try to talk about my life. He would talk over me or completely ignore me, or just give a one-word response and not actually have a conversation. He said he feels bad about himself because I am in a STEM field and he feels like I'm smarter and have the potential for a higher paying job. He said he wants to be a provider as a man but feels like he can't keep up with me. He also said I am not down to earth with my career goals, and he has issue with the fact that I kept changing my goals in the past, and called it erratic. Also, he is placing restrictions on what kind of jobs I can get. During the pandemic, before I started school, both of our jobs went WFH, and he still works from home. I quit to go back to school full-time. He now says that I can only get a WFH job because he thinks if I go into a workplace I will socialize with other people and end up leaving him. I do want to work from home, I loved it, but I'm unhappy with this restriction because it seems unreasonable. I feel ridiculous objecting to it because I genuinely do want to WFH, but the job market is crazy and I will not be in a position to be so picky with employment as a new graduate. He said not working from home would be a deal breaker in the relationship. But I think this is unfair. We did have a conversation a few years ago about both of us really liking working from home, and when I tried to talk to him about the possibility of me having to go into a workplace after I graduate, he blew up and said I was changing and doing a 180, and basically going back on what we agreed on. We never had a specific agreement that both of us work from home. He also says that a lot of spouses cheat on their partners with co-workers, so that is a big factor for him. Additionally, he said he is angry because everything comes easy for me in terms of school/jobs. His words, not mine. It seems like he is bitter about my life for some reason, and he was really angry over it. He is mad because he says he can't trust that I'm not going to change my mind again and want to have a different career. I told him I am pretty sure I found what I really want to do, but that I don't know what the future holds for me. I gave an example about my family member who completed a certificate to help with his current job. My husband said it doesn't count because that family member is male and single. Basically, his argument is that he feels he will never be able to measure up to me in the career or education aspect, and he doesn't like that. Also, he does not want me to work for a prestigious company. I know the chances are very low of me getting into a top company, and I'm not necessarily aiming for that, but I'm planning on applying literally everywhere and seeing what interviews I get. He said he doesn't want me to work for a top company and that I have a big head. I know the chances are slim of anyone making it to a prestigious company, but if the shoe were on the other foot I would support him 100% and celebrate his accomplishment. I also feel like the restriction on what companies I can work for is a bit unreasonable. He only wants me to work for an average company. I feel silly being upset over this, again because I probably will end up working at an average company, just going by statistics. I don't want to start fights over something that won't happen anyway. But I kind of feel too boxed in by this and I don't know what to do. I did reassure him that I don't see it this way and I'm not trying to make him feel bad about himself. I told him I am passionate about my major and that I need to feel happy in my career to feel happy as a person. I also said that I wanted him to share my happiness instead of resenting me. He said he doesn't resent me but that I'm erratic and unstable because I changed my mind over the years. But I feel like that is a bit unfair because we met in high school, and I am 25 now. I don't know anyone who stuck with what they wanted to do in high school. The last point I want to add is that it feels like he never wants to talk about positive things that happened, but when I bring up something negative he gets into the conversation. At this point I try to find bad things to talk about just so that I get some conversation. I'm not sure where to go from here. Our relationship does have some other issues, but I was willing to live with them until the situation started. But it feels wrong to consider ending a marriage over something like this. I don't want to be that person choosing a career over a relationship, and he has been very good to me and been there for me through a lot of stuff. How should I proceed in this situation? Comment. You have been missing some giant red flags. You are not silly for being upset. Actually, you should be so much more than upset. You should be scared of the hold he has on you and your life. You are in a relationship with a controlling, manipulative, misogynistic, self-centered man who is showing all the classic signs of an emotional abuser. As you've seen, anything you do that threatens his fragile ego is going to get shut down. Your intelligence and independence threaten him, because he knows that if you get out in the world and see how other women demand to be treated with respect, you won't let his behavior slide anymore. The reason he only talks about negative things with you is because he takes pleasure in your misery, because he thinks if he can be your only source of happiness, you won't leave him. That's why he wants you to work from home, demands that you don't take specific jobs, etc. It's all about him. Your happiness and well-being mean nothing to him. When you start pushing back, that's when he calls you erratic. It's a manipulation tactic to make you question your own sanity. He will never let you be more than he is, and if you try, his behavior will escalate. Why on earth would you consider staying with this man? Seriously. Real partners celebrate and support success of each other. My wife and I have been together a long time. At various times she made more than I did. Then she was happy to support me through law school and I ended up making much more than she did. In the meantime, she got an advanced degree in her field for a more satisfying job. At each point, we were nothing but supportive even when money was tight or we switched off various roles. You deserve that too. Everyone does. Folks, stop putting up with relationships that drag you down. Being restricted from where you can work or going back to finish your education is a form of abuse. He doesn't want you socializing with people? Yep, that's abuse, too. Sounds like your husband has some pretty serious paranoia and jealousy issues he needs to work out. You might really want to think about seeking divorce so you can do what you want with your life, because it sounds like he wants you to do what he wants with your life, and that is not living. That's adhering to the rules of someone else. I stopped reading halfway down because this guy sounds like a controlling, insecure disaster. Partners should build each other up, not tear them down. What kind of a partner needs you to be less successful and less fulfilled so he can feel better about himself? I'm sorry, but you two no longer seem compatible. You're not choosing a career over a relationship. You're choosing your right to make important life decisions that affect you based on reasonable criteria over unnecessary sacrifices to accommodate someone else's insecurities and bitterness. Talk to your school about what resources they have if you're trying to leave a bad relationship, or at least in terms of getting therapy for yourself. But your husband is not being a partner to you. Don't limit yourself to placate him, especially when you may need all the financial support you can get. I'm having trouble believing this because it's like your BF ran down a list, and usually chauvinists don't really have this much insight into why they are pissed off at their successful partners. If this is true, your husband is holding you back, manipulating you, and refusing to discuss things that are important to you. And he's doing it on purpose, intentionally, because he gets angry when you are successful. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. You're not putting your career before your relationship. Your husband is choosing to put his insecurities over your relationship. You're 25, hon, don't set yourself on fire to keep this guy warm. Do not ever put your life on hold for anyone who isn't willing to compromise. Your husband is all you can and no compromise whatsoever. Here's the thing. If you put your school on hold, if you put your career on hold just to placate your husband's flimsy ego, you will be stuck with retail and warehouses. And he will find some other way to limit you and hold you back. Eventually the relationship will fall apart, and you will be stuck with crappy jobs, no education, and less opportunity to pick it back up. You will have sold your entire future to keep peace with a man who doesn't give a damn about you. Because he doesn't care, you know. A loving, caring partner would encourage you. They would talk with you about your dreams, your future together, how these great opportunities are blessings for you both. A loving partner doesn't want to tear you down to their level. It's a weak man that feels like he has to oppress a successful woman. You need to invest in yourself and your future. He's actively discouraging, beating you down for daring to dream. I'm over 50, I've seen a lot of women give up their futures for a man. So many times, they end up without the degree, without the job, and without the man. Invest in yourself. You deserve all good things. Next story 2. My boyfriend of 7 years broke up with me a few months ago. It was a rough breakup. He refuses to talk to me about it and is upset I've told him this hurts me. Am I off base for thinking this isn't okay? The overall situation, my boyfriend of 8 years broke up with me 5 months ago. He told me it was because of the unhealthy codependent patterns in our relationship that were causing him a lot of stress, which totally makes sense, but it turns out this was not the whole story. I ended up extremely hurt by everything that came out at the end and how he handled the breakup. He does not want to talk to me about any of it, though, and is upset with me ATM for letting him know I've been hurt and thinking he created more harm in this situation than I did. Backstory, we had one of those sickeningly sweet relationships that made people around us gag while asking us how we did it. We talked about everything, or so I thought, and we had things like communication rituals around sharing from our hearts about hurt we caused each other. Because I'd been through rough breakups in the past, at one point in our relationship, he promised me he'd do things differently. It was a really beautiful moment that neither of us ever forgot. He stared into my eyes and said things like, "I would never allow that to happen to you again." I cried in his arms. We did some intimate stuff. All that wonderful lovey-dovey BS, sorry, a bit jaded at the moment. We agreed to have the sort of breakup that you do over the course of a month or two, leaving plenty of time to get over the initial shock, support each other through some of the worst of it, have difficult conversations, and eventually part amicably. Idealistic? Sure. But based on some on-again/off-again moments we'd had in the first half of the relationship, this seemed totally doable for us. How the breakup actually happened, we had just started therapy for our issues with codependency-related dynamics, a lot of getting triggered, flooded, and shutting down. A few days after our 4th session, he admitted that even though therapy was really productive, he had less hope for our relationship than ever. We agreed to reflect for at least a week and bring it up in therapy a few days later. Instead, he used that session to break up with me, which was a horrible experience for the record. He wanted to leave immediately after the session and come back after I'd moved out, but he ended up staying the night after I literally begged him to while ugly crying, "Not my finest moment," and he left to be with friends in the morning. He then decided to come back a couple days later to be with me for the week I was packing up my things, but he felt like a different person. He was super closed off and I had to shove most of my hurt and emotions down, because he would get upset with me when I showed too much, since it was triggering for him. He even admitted he was struggling not to resent me for being emotional. During that week, things started to come out and I put together a lot more in the days after I left. He wanted a more attractive partner. He'd broken a boundary I'd set around a co-worker he had a crush on. He believed he was actually polyamorous and always had been. He thought I wasn't successful enough for him. He intended to start moving on with women he'd largely or entirely hid his interest in within a couple to few weeks after breaking up with me, including one who had been a huge issue over the course of our relationship to the point that just seeing her name spikes my heartbeat. He didn't intend to talk to me about any of this until I'd already fully processed it and could remain completely equanimous, so, like, years from now. The list goes on. I was /mdevastated. These were my worst nightmares come true, especially given the fact that most of these things, arguably all, he had assured/promised me weren't true over the course of our relationship, and some even during the last week we spent together. I've never felt so betrayed. Current situation, 3 weeks after our breakup, I texted him some of the above fears that I wasn't sure about and he confirmed them. Since then, we've had to communicate about practical matters over the course of the few months, but he asked that I don't share hurt or emotions, so I've told him almost nothing about my thoughts and feelings. There's been a few times, though, when I've shared the general sentiment that the way this breakup was handled was creating a lot of pain for me, and that I would like things to change. One time I also told him I was really hurt in general after he had given the okay to share hard things. He has thanked me for sharing, says things like he wants to figure out how to make the situation better and that he wants to understand my experience, but that he's been really busy and needed time to think before he responds. A couple weeks ago, he finally got back to me, but his response to all this was about how I'd hurt him in my communication by not seeing him and sharing I'd been hurt. He also asked me to assure him I believed that we hurt each other equally in all this, the "it takes two to make a problem" stance, which I definitely can't do given the above. I feel like he's in complete denial and that makes this all even more hurtful. Comment. Look, at the end of the day he doesn't want to be in the relationship, and torturing yourself with who said what why when won't change that. You're valid in feeling hurt, but he's also likely valid for feeling that the way he left given the toxic dynamic you describe. He's asked you not to engage in conversations about the relationship or your hurt feelings, and continuing to do that will only make things worse for both of you. It doesn't matter how fair that may or may not be, he's done. You need to start being done too. And I'm sorry, I understand the grief you're feeling. Now coming to the promises he made to you, AITA Avenue to accept that there is an almost definitive pattern in every relationship, and each and every relationship goes through some stages. In stage 1, early into the relationship, there is enormous positivity about each other, high willingness to sacrifice time and energy, significant curiosity about each other, etc. Partners will sense and perceive only good stuff about each other at this stage, and the promises made by him is to be treated as part of stage 1 dynamics in any relationship. Trying to make him feel accountable for those promises and / or you're feeling cheated is a bit stretching it too far. Please treat as part of life and try and focus on moving on with your life. Please try and reconcile with the reality of the broken relationship and channelize your energies in goals and activities that has potential to make your life more happy, fulfilling and meaningful. Wish you best of luck. Please feel free to message me. Apologies, the first part of my reply was cut off from the reply. You may read it as: your post was very touching and I assume that pouring it out all at once made you feel a bit better already. You sound very kind, caring and extremely giving, and you would have tried to give everything at your disposal emotionally, physically, and materially to make your ex happy and satisfied. The feeling of such heavy frustration is a result of feeling cheated for him to enjoy your total attention and breaking it up after 8 long years. Are you wrong him letting to know how you feel about it after the breakup? Absolutely not. He deserves to hear it and make efforts to comfort you. If he is trying to run away and feeling triggered, it may be because of some weakness in his personality. It is likely that he suffers from mild anxiety and fears failure and rejection. Maybe that would explain his conduct. 7 years is a long time. At the end of the day he doesn't want to be accountable. It's easier to dismiss than to look at himself in the mirror to become a better person. I know it hurts and I'm sorry. He'll eventually pop back up into your life. Don't let him.